fact, we want to take you back to an earlier story where the SIU says it's considering legal action against former Eskom CEO André Ruyter and Business Leadership South Africa. That's over the private investigation into corruption at the power utility, which was done without Eskom board approval. Let's bring in once again the organization Undoing Tax Abuses Accountability Division Director, Advocate Stefanie Fick. A very good evening to you, Advocate Fick. Thank you so much for your time and your patience tonight. So, as you're hearing from the briefing today, André, head of the SIU, saying that, in fact, what Ruyter may have done here amounts to maladministration and there should be accountability. I wonder, to your mind, what that accountability should look like.
Well, it's something one has to consider, and a very interesting question. I mean, I don't want to disagree with Advocate Mutibi, but I was, while he was saying that, I was thinking, you have, a person that was having problems, or there was at least allegations of serious corruption at Eskom. We know that there was serious corruption at Eskom because of the State Capture Commission and all the evidence that was laid there. You also have, this threat that there's, people involved, high-ranking officials involved. And what do you do to investigate corruption? So can one say, by investigating the corruption in Eskom, then making available the intelligence, because that is ultimately what also Advocate Mutibi has said, is that it's intelligence. It doesn't appear that, that there was huge human rights, being discriminated against. So what is really the problem? It was also not state funds that was wasted. So can you say it's wasteful expenditure? So let me summarize by saying this. If anything untoward happened, then obviously, the former CEO, André Ruyter, should be prosecuted for whatever criminal activity they have evidence for. I am just wondering that if you do sit where we sit with just the vast amount of corruption, is it really wrong to want to know what is going on and to assist maybe law enforcement to point you in the right direction?
The concern from Advocate Mutibi, and he does say that this report, while the SIU cannot rely on what it says fully as a basis for its actions, could be a helpful tool, an aid, if you will, in the investigations going forward. But what he does raise is the issue of precedence, right? So do we then, based on this, possibly create a precedence where heads of SOEs and other entities can accept private funds to pay for investigations? And if so, where do we begin and where do we end, right?
Well, I'm still struggling to see the negative. So if you have, any CEO or head of an SOE, in the current situation where we know that corruption is rife, that we do have problems with, not all policemen are corrupt, certainly not, but, that you sit with this question of corruption, and all you want to do as a CEO is want to obtain intelligence because you want to know what is going on in your company, and by doing that, you're asking for the private sector. I just want to stand still there for a moment, because at the end of the day, let's agree, and I agree with Advocate Mutibi there, hearing everything that was said, is that this was pure intelligence. So the SIU and the Hawks and all of that still need to do proper investigation, objective investigation, and then obviously give that to the prosecuting authorities so that they can decide who should be prosecuted or not.
I suppose the point then, Advocate Fick, is the issue of procedure, right? He did not do it in line with what is allowed, where the board was not informed, there was no approval sought. He basically unilaterally agreed with the business organization to launch an investigation. There was no consultation, private money was taken, and they've always been, for example, even when you look at what happens with the NPA funding, there's forever the controversy around whether who pays for the probe basically has a motive and what is the extent of their involvement. So ultimately, everyone agrees there's a corruption problem at Eskom. The issue where Ruyter is concerned is, did he flout process and procedure, and whether that should go without sanction?
Well, if he flouted procedure, obviously, I think there we agree. He should face the music. full stop. I mean, one cannot argue around if you contravene, your company's policies or whatever, but you should face the music. Just out of interest sake, I mean, as a civil activist organization, as many civil activist organizations being worried about the state of corruption and the fact that we have seen, the NPA is although there's some movement, is still behind on prosecution for state capture. I mean, we're talking state capture that happened, years ago. Still haven't seen the amount of people we want to see in orange overalls, etc., etc. And that we receive evidence of, corrupt activities and would like to help law enforcement by giving them, information. I'm just wondering are we comparing the two, or are we saying that, a CEO of a company, and in this instance, the Ruyter, did he do wrong?
That is the distinction. That is the distinction, because organizations such as yourself, OUTA, has conducted many, shall we say, bits of research, investigation work, but none of it has been commissioned by, let's say, the head of a government department, the head of an SOE. And this appears to be, at least from today's briefing, the technicality upon which De Ruyter in particular has come in for a bit of criticism, because even in the hearing, no one questioned the fact that there is a corruption problem at Eskom. But what they said is they're going to use or go through this report because there are bits that require pursuing. It won't be swept under the rug. But that in doing that, he too should be scrutinized or possibly face some form of action for going about it the wrong way. So my point to you is, park the De Ruyter issue. Would we apply the same rule, what you're suggesting, to any other CEO? Let's say if the CEO of the SABC did the same thing, the CEO of Denel, would we be as forgiving, or is it a set of different rules for De Ruyter because of his framing in the current discourse in the country?
Yeah, one wonders. I think my gut feeling is if the CEO of SABC obtains money in order to ask for an investigation into corruption, where that you don't know who to trust, and that will lead to curbing of wasteful expenditure, corruption in an SOE, that is ultimately, if it is not, if there's no stop to corruption, and we don't get and we don't hold the guilty to account, will mean more wasteful expenditure to South Africans. Would one be against that?
But certainly, based on this report, it itself is unable to hold the corrupt or the alleged corrupt actors at Eskom accountable, because as things stand, it still requires a criminal investigation, which this report on its own is unable to get that accountability. So you wonder what difference it's made, really, when the complaints or concerns could have been taken, let's say, to the Hawks, the NPA, and others to pursue, because ultimately that's where it's going.
Yes, and that's certainly where it should go. So I think let's agree that if there is any transgression, whoever it is, please can we investigate it and hold to account? Because I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations, I think you will agree with me, that's what we require in South Africa currently, is holding people that has committed unlawful acts, whether it's on an ethical level, whether it's on a criminal level, hold them to account.
Right.
Wholeheartedly agree with you. And if the SIU, which it seems out of their report back to SCOPA today, it seems that they are investigating an enormous amount of things happening at Eskom.
Right.
That you are talking about billions and billions of rands, and that to me is the good news.
Right. And
that to me is.
Please finish your thought. Advocate Fick, are you still with us?
Yes, sorry, I do apologize.
Fantastic.
Just repeat your question.
Okay, I just want to get your thoughts, because we're almost out of time, on the issue of the politicians, because André De Ruyter did say around February that there are politicians who were or are involved in the looting at Eskom, in this cartel behavior, the work of syndicates, and Advocate Mutibi, in fact, supported that today, only withholding the names because of the legalities around the publication of that. And I don't imagine anyone was surprised to hear that, were you?
Well, he's basically saying what was said before, but here one needs to caution, and I think it was wise of Advocate Mutibi. I think, you know, there's a fine line between, or there's a difference, not a fine line. There's a difference between gossip and allegations, and then having enough evidence and holding someone to account. So I think it was wise to not make the names known. But if, again, the plight is that if there are people, you know, exposed and there's evidence against them, no matter who you are, should be held accountable.
And are you holding your breath that any politicians, especially perhaps the most senior ones, allegedly involved in this, will be held accountable? Because the Ruyter suggested, in fact, that a member of cabinet or members of cabinet had been involved in some capacity.
Well, unfortunately, history up till now has sort of, I think, you know, is there hope? There's always hope. There's always hope that there will be accountability. But if one look at, you know, previously politically exposed people that, you know, there was allegations of state capture, allegations, etc., that is currently still in Parliament, I don't know if I have hope that political parties will hold to account, you know, the people. I think that will be sorted out at the voting stations next year. But, you know, in terms of criminal prosecutions, hopefully the NPA has grown from or has moved away from the state capture era, and that they can objectively and independently decide who they want to prosecute or not if there's enough evidence. Whether that person is a cabinet member, whether that person is a normal, whether that person is a CEO of or an ex-CEO of a big SOE, doesn't matter. Without fear, favour or prejudice.
Advocate Stefanie Fick, always good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time on Newzroom Afrika.